Hey everyone, I'm a miniature painter and I love brushes. I've got all kinds of different brushes, different sizes, different quality, mostly sable, and they cost a lot of money. I've also got all kinds of different paint. And I mean, I buy a whole heck of a lot of paint and all different kinds of it. But I was actually approached with a collab opportunity. Wow, I made it. And the folks over at Arrtx sent me 2 boxes of acrylic markers. Thanks Arrtx for sending these over. Now, I haven't really been interested in acrylic markers before, but hey, let's give them a try. Now, I have 2 boxes of 30 colors. The one on the right is pale and opaque colors, and the left is metallic, which I'm a bit more excited for. Each of these boxes retails for $30, so it is about $1 per paint. Now, here you can see that I've already worked with these markers on just a plain base. On the top of this base, you can see that I went from left to right, but actually the opposite way on those marker sets. And then just below those, I actually did the correct order for the metallic paints. And this gives you quite a nice view. These dark metallic colors are something old, so you can ignore these. And over here, I did some writing just to test out the potential of freehand. But let's take a look at one of these markers, and this one is a pink metallic color. And you can see that the pen tip, if you will, is rather large, especially when you compare it to a paintbrush. And that does create some issues with getting into details. But I'll get into that a little bit later on. Let's see how this works. So I'm just gonna take this base completely unprimed, and there you see it. It's quite striking and easy to apply. And that's just one of the many metallic paints in the set. They come with codes to give them names, not actual names like paint brands that you might be familiar with. And then let's show you off one of the pales and opaques. And I kind of like this color here, 6-9 with a 2 in the middle. And I think this is a pretty cool tan color. And once again, you can see how quickly it applies and how easily. But really, painting a base and a miniature is very different. The question is, can we paint miniatures with this? And kind of. So in my initial experiments, I played on a Gundam Converge figure, which is a plastic toy that I purchased in Japan while I was over there. The toy is pre-painted and effectively pre-primed, so I just applied the pen right over it. And I used that same pink metallic that I showed off before, as well as a purplish kind of color as well. And you can really see how it applies onto this sort of toy. And honestly, it's pretty great for it. But there are a lot of crevices that were difficult to get to, and I mentioned that little details thing earlier. I'll show you how I conquered that in a bit. But the Gundam Converge toy is also not a miniature. So instead, let's try painting a Space Marine with it. Why a Space Marine? Why not a Space Marine? They're the most common thing out there, they're everywhere. So if I can't paint this guy, I can't paint any miniature with these markers. I've got a limited color selection, but thankfully there's something that works out pretty well, so let's get painting. We're gonna get started with 6-7. I hate myself. I can't believe I did that. But anyways, moving on, we're just gonna pop our cap and we're gonna start applying it just straight on. I primed the miniature black, so this will go on really well. And it is going on fairly well, but that pen tip is still really large and I've already got a mistake. But that's okay, we will just paint right over that later. Honestly, this guy's not gonna be a masterpiece. He's not gonna be super clean. I'm just kind of exploring these markers with you. And as I apply this, you can honestly see how really lovely of a Space Wolf color this is. However, it isn't applying in a single coat. It's not strong enough. You can still see black under it. And that's a shame for trying to speed paint, which I think would be one of the targets for a product like this. It is interesting that I'm using a different skill than brushstrokes, penmanship really. So to me, it feels out of place, but to somebody who hasn't picked up a brush, it might feel much better. And here you can see the miniature after that first coat of that Space Wolf blue, let's call it, the 6-7. And like I said earlier, there's black showing through, so it's not a single coat wonder. Additionally, it's really tough to get into those details where things are getting blocked, but I've kind of come up with something to get through this. So I'm taking my marker and effectively using this base as a palette. And once I've got some paint on there, I'm gonna grab my brush. Now it sucks that I can't just use a marker for this job. I have to use a brush to get into those details, and I really wish they had smaller tip sizes for this product. You can also apply some of the paint by just kind of like brushing it on your marker. But this is a great way where you wouldn't have to buy another paint just to get into those details. You can use the same marker product, just in a creative way. I apologize for the filming snafu here, but it does allow me to paint that color in those harder to reach areas. And here you can see that blue completely finished after I applied another coat. Still a little bit of see-through, but hey, not too bad. And so after this, I'm just gonna kind of start going through different colors and applying them to the various details on the model. I'm not gonna go over what codes they are or particularly anything like that. I'm just gonna kind of show you me applying these different colors and how it kind of brings the miniature together. And that white for the purity seal went on really easily, which is pretty impressive. And so really, I kind of find it a little hit and miss with some of the colors in the boxes. That white worked out really well. This brown is solid. It's a nice kind of pale brown. And I love that Space Wolf Blue's color, but it didn't apply as well as I would have liked. Really, overall, I find the metallics to be kind of the stars of these products. It's not that metallics are hard to paint, but this product just kind of like really fastly gets it on there. You don't have to like do any thinning or anything like that. You just pop the cap and boom, it's right on there. This color is a different off-white and it's weaker than the one I used for the purity seal. It's a great color for this tabard, but it does apply a little splotchy. So some of these products definitely need multiple coats going in. And that brings me back to what I mentioned earlier, is the speed painting aspect of it. Do I think these things are particularly fast? I do. I do think they're faster than going through all your paints, getting them on the palette, thinning them, applying them, multiple coats, just like that. This is faster than that. It's also pretty useful for some kind of creative solutions to mundane problems. I've had this Gorgonaut half painted forever, and I finally decided to finish painting it, and I use these markers to help with some of the extra detailing. Especially the various metallic colors. They were actually very useful for this thing. So various little spots where I would go over it with gold or silver or what have you, I could just quickly dab a little bit on with this marker without having to fuss around with paints. And really, I liked that. It was a different sort of relaxing experience. But I didn't just use metallic paints, I used some of the others, such as that white from the purity seal I used to do this little skull on the foot. I also did the horns that are on the body a little later on. I think these markers really shine on these bigger, more vehicular models. And I do want to stress the fact that it was actually pretty relaxing to use them, especially for all of these little rivets. With a paintbrush, it's kind of a pain in the butt, but with the marker, it was just dot, 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 super easy. Now, I didn't just leave them as this. I did go over them with washes and other products to kind of make them look better, but it was very useful for the process. And since the Gorgonaut is so big, I even used the metallic colors for edge highlighting, and it worked out fairly well. And I will admit that it doesn't work out super well for the smaller minis, but for this big vehicle, I liked it. Now, let's return back to our Space Marine, who at this point is basically done. The color set I had didn't have a black, it didn't have a proper yellow, so I couldn't get this paint scheme down perfectly, but for very little actual effort, it's acceptable. And what more could you really ask for? And by the way, I noticed that I didn't paint this metal part on the gun, so just a quick pop of the cap and I can fix that, and that's awesome. But obviously this is not an amazing mini, so I wanted to try to add a little bit to it by doing some washes and maybe a little bit of highlighting. And so I busted out our good friends, the contrast paints. And you might say, why aren't you just priming it white and using contrast paints in the first place? And that's a good question. And if you say that, maybe the markers just aren't for you, and I get it. I did mention not having all the colors, so I did support that yellow with a Too Thin Coats color, just that single color, and you can even see the kind of tan color I used as the base through that color. And I think it turned out pretty nice looking. And so after that, I reapplied with the markers to try to clean it up. I tried to get fine lines to highlight, but it was not easy. I couldn't do it very well. And that'll just bring me to my biggest beef with the product is the marker tips are just too big to work on miniatures. I don't know if the tips have to be that big in order to get the paint to flow, but if there were smaller tipped markers, they would work much better. But realistically, overall, I'm not unhappy with this Marine. It's a pretty decent model to put on the tabletop, and it required extremely little effort, and I think that's pretty cool. So at this point, I'll go over some quick pros and cons. At $30 a box, you're getting each color for $1. That's great pricing. There are a bunch of different sets, so you can get all the different kinds of colors too. I only had these 2 sets. I think there's some definite accessibility wins here. People who might not be good with brushes can definitely grab a marker and do much better, especially children. I'm not a dad, but if I were, I would be much more confident giving my kid a marker to paint rather than a paintbrush, a mug of water, all that jazz. I think it would be much easier for the kid to grasp just using the marker and coloring in the lines. And another pro would be it made certain mundane tasks like rivets very relaxing. And then we can move on to our cons, and that would be the pen size is too large to do details. So I effectively don't think it's great for miniatures. Another would be the pen tip kind of wears out a little quickly if you're rough with it. I was rough with that 6.7 blue, and the pen tip is not as sharp as the other pen tips. It's definitely noticeable. Another would be lack of control of what you're buying. They are in large paint sets, and while they are cheap, you can't individually buy colors that you want. And then finally, coverage is great on some, but poor on others, and that really affects the kind of speed quality that you might expect out of a marker product for painting. But anyways, I have been talking for about 12 minutes. It's almost been nonstop, so I will end this video. Tell me what you think of these markers in the comments down below. Are you interested? Are you not? Let me know. Leave a like, leave a subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video.